I think we have to recognize that we are in a moment of opportunity and be doing everything we can to stand up this industry. So women's sports is here to stay and here to be big, big business.
Welcome back to The Deal. So excited to have Haley Rosen with us. She is, of course, founder and CEO of Just Women's Sports. I read it every day. It is the go-to place to understand what's happening in the booming world of women's sports. Haley, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me and reading our newsletter every day. I love it.
I love it. It really is. It's a must read. And I guess let's start there because that feels like the tip of the spear in terms of sort of getting people into this world. How do you sort of come to that idea? And then we want to talk about how you build the business, but the initial idea, where does it come from?
Yeah. A little bit of background on me just because it's relevant to this idea. I was a soccer player. I played in college and then played professionally for a little bit in the US and abroad. That experience really led me to this idea. I was playing before the 2019 World Cup. I bring up that timing just because I think it was really the start of everything we're seeing. We were just starting to sell out stadiums. The stadiums were small. Attendance was up. It went from a small number to a slightly bigger number. Brands were coming on board. But the main thing was that you could feel there was a shift. There was something happening. There was an energy and excitement, a momentum that was really starting to build. I had a bunch of injuries. I retired sooner than I probably would have liked. And kind of jumped into, the quote unquote real world, got a job. And when I was working, I'm just like a sports fan, like born and raised in LA. I followed the Lakers, I followed the Dodgers. I just wanted to follow the NWSL and WNBA. Just like I didn't think anything of it. I just wanted to follow sports that felt part of it. And I couldn't do it like at all. And I
Mm.
started hunting for, it looks like my friend just got traded. Where can I find that information? What's the NWSL standings? Can I go see that goal? Like I started just looking for this information and everything I did see was just very weird to me. It felt very young, hyper feminine, a lot of lifestyle content, which, there's a place for all of this. But my question was just like, where are the sports? Where are the highlights and the stats? And where are the sports? And that question is what led me to Just Women's Sports. I basically grabbed an Instagram handle, called it Just Women's Sports, started posting the type of content I wanted to see, and sort of snowballed to what I'm doing today.
And so at what point do you determine this is a business and a business which needs money
Yeah.
and you need to go find that money?
So it's funny looking back because I feel like I was both like stumbled into this and also like knew exactly what we were trying to do from the start. When did I think it was a bit like a business and could be a big business? Like right away. Like as soon as I kind of uncovered that like no one was really talking about women's sports and I felt like what did exist just didn't feel true to what it was. I was like, this is a huge opportunity. This is crazy. This doesn't exist. I feel like there's so much happening here. Like we got to go. Um, in terms of like, I need money and how we do this, I feel like I just kind of really did kind of stumble into early days. Like truly I was working in tech and I was like out with friends one night and was like talking about this. I like started becoming obsessed with the idea that there needed to be more women's sports coverage. And my boyfriend, now husband at the time, was like, well, you could like start an Instagram account. Like, anyone could do it. I was literally in the back of a cab in New York and grabbed the Just Women's Sports handle and just like started posting. And really quickly we went from like no followers, no content strategy to like 40,000 followers, 100,000 followers. And it just kind of started going like that. And I think really quickly I sort of caught up with like, okay, there's something here. There's an audience that's excited. What do we need to do to turn this into like a real content business?
So Haley, JWS, you're in that cab, you're talking with your boyfriend then, your husband now, you're kind of brainstorming, you're really excited as most entrepreneurs are, but you're still so far away from actually raising capital. Talk to me about that first 400,000 that you raised. How difficult was that? What was your pitch? And what was you think the hook that got them to be first? That's always the hardest.
Yeah. The first check we ever raised was the easiest check, and I would pay for that later down the road because When I was working in tech, I was living in San Francisco at the time. I had some mentors that were VCs and working in sort of the venture capital space. And so when I was thinking about this and becoming obsessed and excited with the idea, I got connected to Eric Chen, who was our first investor. And he's a very early stage pre seed investor. He meets founders when they're kind of in the ideation stage. And I was coming to him really as a mentor saying, I believe in this. I'm excited about it. I don't know exactly what it looks like, but I think I'm going to quit my job and do this. And he was like, great. And here's seed money. Like, let's go. Let's figure it out together. And that was like, I think I was going to do this any way I look at it, just because I think I was young and crazy enough. But I think that it forced all this stuff quickly. We had to like set up a business and set up a business account and think about hiring and think about like what are our goals and like if we're going to raise another round of capital, what are the key metrics we're going to like measure ourselves against. And so it kind of just got me going in a more serious way really quickly. And I think it was fortunate to meet, I obviously was very fortunate to meet Eric. I mean, that initial funding lasted us, it was like almost 2 years. We built like the initial brand, we launched our initial show, our newsletter, the content strategy, the early team was all from that initial check, which did come really easily. And then later rounds were tougher. I think, we've been really fortunate. I'm kind of jumping ahead, but we're really, really fortunate to have some amazing investors around the cap table: Joe and Clara Tsai, David Blitzer, Michelle Kang. Um, but, I give him so much credit because when we were raising in it was like 2022-ish, you know, people weren't talking about women's sports the
Right.
way they're talking about it now. No one believed, like, truly, like, when I say, like, I would walk in the room and honestly, I feel like people took the meeting because 'cause I'm a female founder and it was a kinda interesting topic, but, like, they were not taking this seriously. No matter what metrics I pulled up, no matter how much I could show that this space is growing, look at our engagement, look at, everything is up and to this right, and legacy media is behind. People were like, "Maybe this should be a charity. Women's sports has never worked. Why do you think it'll work now?" And I just feel like we were kind of banging our head against the wall, and I really give that group so much credit for listening and like believing, true believers in women's sports as sports. And I sort of jumped ahead, but we're really fortunate to have a lot of great people.
I want to come back to that fundraising in a second, but to fast forward to today, sort of sit with today for a second, sort of this moment in 2025 where, you know, expansion teams are going for $250 million in the W. We saw the transaction, last year for Angel City. They're in your hometown at a then record valuation of $250 million with Willow Bay and Bob Iger coming in to become the control owners there. Did this happen faster than you thought it might in terms of the rising valuations? I mean, you are intimately familiar with sort of all of the inputs and outputs here. Like, from a business perspective, how do you gauge it right now?
I think this is the moment, and I think it's like it's felt slow all at once, and it feels like this is the all at once moment. I did feel, we launched in 2020. I did feel like there was a couple of years there where I was banging my head against the wall. We as a company, our audience growth was crazy, our engagement was up. We were doing, so many things that I think media companies really, you'd love to see as a media company, and we're still struggling to get people bought in, get brands on board.
Mm,
All of a sudden, that's changed. The conversation has completely changed, and that feels like truly over the last year or so. And I think the big shift is that from my point of view, is that brands are really bought in. They're not
yeah.
talking to women's sports and sort of these subcategories. They're talking to about investing and, sponsoring women's sports from their sports marketing budgets. And to me, that's been the huge unlock because all of a sudden you're seeing not just investor dollars go into the space, but brand dollars go in. And I feel like that's been a huge unlock.
So Haley, I mean, you mentioned some of your investors, some of the great blue chippers, investors in this country. What is the difference of your pitch for, say, a Joe Tsai, Clara Tsai, David Blitzer versus a Kevin Durant? Is it different or is it exactly the same?
That's a good question. Maybe it should be different, but I think it's exactly the same just because I'm a bit of a someone told me I'm a one-note politician.
Mm.
I I kind of like see this space how it is, and it's really hard for me to say it any other way than like how I see it and I believe it. I think what resonates with them is slightly different. Like talking to Kevin Durant and Rich Kleiman, like we get to talk kind of like as athletes and like something that always stood out to me with KD is like he's a true hooper, which I know
Yeah,
this isn't
he's a
new
baller. Yeah.
information, but like he's really into women's basketball and he always has been. And that was like really fun to meet him and connect and be able to talk about that. And it wasn't like, oh, do we think women's basketball, like, oh, it's the right thing to do to support? It was like, here's my favorite player. Here's what I'm excited about. Do you think that team overperformed or underperformed? Like, those are really fun conversations to have. And then I think with, with Joe and Clara, when I was saying we need to get out of treating women's sports as charity and treat it like a business, they were like, yes, 100%. We've been saying that. So, I kind of am what I am for better or worse, but I think what resonates with folks depends on, where they're coming from.
All right, so Jason and I are investors. We can do a little role play here. Give us your one note, 30 seconds. Give it
Oh
to
my
us.
God. Oh my God. I just got nervous. Okay, here's my 30 seconds is legacy media is really well set up around the legacy leagues, NFL, NBA, maybe the MLB. And that starts with, what they prioritize, their temples, how they build their audience, how they work with sponsors. The whole thing is really, really well set up for those properties. It's not as simple as just add in more. The legacy companies, they're not great at men's lacrosse or men's soccer. It's not just, women's sports. So if we want that same type of industry and ecosystem in women's sports, we have to go build it. And we have to go build it around soccer and basketball, NWSL, WNBA. We have to make their temples, our temples, build their audience, work with sponsors in that way. And I think if we do that, we can build up this audience and create an industry that is just as big, if not bigger, than men's sports. But it starts with media. So are you
I'm
in?
in.
Love it. You're
I'm in.
hired.
We're
Let's
in.
go.
Boom.
We're in. Write the check. Write the check.
Yes.
Alex,
I'll
you
send
write
you
the
the
bigger
term
check.
sheet.
I'll write the smaller check.
We're in.
So to that end, I mean, you went exactly where I wanted to go, Haley, which is this notion of you have this opportunity and challenge to build something new, to understand an audience from the ground up. And you saw the metrics, which obviously then you use to get the sponsors and all of that. But I think it's fair to say, and I want you to keep me honest here, that this audience consumes differently. It has different expectations. It has different rhythms. It has all sorts of, in a very positive way, different characteristics. What are those? And then what do you do to create different products for that audience?
I think yes and no with the whole premise of this. I really believe, and I think we're seeing as women's sports pushes further and further into the mainstream, that women's sports fans are sports fans. And I
Yeah.
actually think, and they consume sports the same way sports fans consume sports. I think there's two things with women's sports fans that are important to keep in mind. Um, but I don't think it's sort of unique to women's sports fans are a next gen sports fan. And I think that's
Yes.
really, really exciting. And it means sort of two things. 80% of our audience at Just Women's Sports is under the age of 34. Heavily Gen
Wow.
Z, heavily millennial, which means they're consuming the majority of their content on digital channels. And so, we talk about cutting the cord. This audience didn't have a cord to cut.
They're cord
They
nevers. Yeah.
they're cord nevers. And so I think those are like really the two unique things about this demographic is they're younger and they're digital first. Beyond that, like sports are sports. It's been the whole thing. And so I think that's like really exciting. And this is something I've said to a lot of folks around women's sports is I think there's legacy properties that are really trying to think about how do we capture and engage this next gen sports fan? How do we build for a digital sports ecosystem? Women's sports is starting there. That's the opportunity. And that's
Yeah.
part of why I'm so bullish is let's not go backwards. Let's build for where sports fans are going. I think that's really cool and exciting.
And Haley, how do you generate revenue for your company, for JWS?
This is a really good question. My mom asks me this all the time. We have a sponsorship model. So we work with brands, via ads or sponsorships. And, I think it's the same way a lot of these athletes and teams and leagues work, generate revenue as well. We obviously don't have the rights dollars coming through, but this whole thing is very sponsorship driven.
Mm.
And so, Haley, arguably the most notable thing you have done with Just Women's Sports is to treat the coverage like sports coverage. And I do think, and I want you to, I truly want you to argue with me if you disagree with this. But part of the premise of women's sports need to stop being treated like charity, I think bled into the content up until a certain point. That the content was like, look at these girls, like they're trying so hard, like good for them, and we need to support them. And listen, we could talk the rest of the day about sort of the take world of sports right now, but part of what it does feel like you're trying to do is to give sports fans what they want, which is a place to be like, okay, this team won, this team lost, this person played well, this person didn't play as well. This is sort of what's happening in the league right now. This is who seems to be like surging, who is falling back, and all that. Is that a fair assessment, or how would you characterize it?
Super fair. And I think like to be, look at what we do critically. I still think we, Just Women's Sports, could even do better with this. I think it's hard to not sort of fall into this trap. But yeah, I think it when we say you have to treat women's sports like sports, we mean it in every category. And through a media lens, that means you have to be honest and real and authentic about it. And like, believe me, I was an athlete. I really empathize and I get I get it sucks to be criticized. I get it sucks the scrutiny. And also media coverage around women's sports fuels this whole thing. And I think as a fan, fans want authenticity. I
Yeah,
love soccer. I love watching soccer. I love watching the US women's national team. What I do when I watch the team is I debate, should that player have gotten the look? Does someone else deserve more time? Did she play well? Did she not? And not because I'm trying to be a hater, because you love it and you care and it's exciting and it's fun. And so we need that in women's sports. And we need to get comfortable that if we're going to have real conversations, it's not all going to be rainbows and butterflies. There's going to be times where there's criticism and critique and can't just all be good, good, good all the time. Everyone tried. And believe me, these women are the best in the world at what they
totally.
do. They know when they're playing well. They know when they didn't play well. They know. I think they can handle it.
Yeah.
And I agree with you. Like, I think on the men's side, the take culture has maybe gotten a little crazy. But, I think where is the Charles Barkley on the women's side? Where are the
Yeah.
people that can bring fun and joy and real conversation? I think that's really, really critical. And that's like what I want Just Women's Sports to do and be. And I think there's times where we have hit that. There's times we've gone too far. There's times we haven't gone far enough. But I think that's where we have to push this space because that's what we all love about sports. It's fun to be a fan. We have to be allowed to have fun with it.
Yeah. It is interesting to see I say this as a more than, mildly interested viewer in the sense that I also, want to understand where media is going. I mean, we talk about it on this show all the time. You look at what Candace Parker is doing, you look at what Chennai is doing. Like, I mean, Rebecca Lobo, I would put in that category as well. It's like these are real ones
Yeah.
saying the real things on air and in a way that I think is super compelling. So let me ask you this. How do you think about new products? Like you're in the business, across the board of different media properties. What's working maybe better than you thought? What's working not as well in terms of what your audience is engaging with media, sort of media type wise?
Yeah. So I think three thoughts here. One is I think the platform really matters. I say digital, I talk about social a lot, but I still think as a sports sort of world, we're not paying enough attention to the role that social media plays in building these communities, building the fandom. And I'll give you an example. Um, Last year for March Madness, when Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese, blew up, it was awesome, biggest viewership ever. We could see on our social channels that this was going to be an absolutely massive Final Four. And I often say social media is a leading indicator and TV numbers are lagging indicators of where the
Mm,
interest and excitement is. I don't think we realize that enough in women's sports. And I think we need to pay more attention and figure out how to like really utilize that. And then in terms of the type of content, I think there's two things that we want to do really, really well. One is we want to bring you news. We want to provide that service to a fan. And I think this is something we often take for granted on the men's side. It's really easy to be a casual fan of men's sports. You could follow
Yes.
trades and, it's NBA free agency right now. My phone is blowing up with every trade that's happening. That can often be hard to follow on the women's side, not for the biggest names, maybe not for the biggest teams, but I think across the board, it's too hard to find basic information. So, news is a really important service that we want to provide, and I think a really important piece of the ecosystem. And then, two is sort of what we're talking about. I call it that wave two content, but really it's who's driving the cultural dialogue, who's having those conversations in public spaces. And you mentioned Shanae and Candace, I think they do a really good job at that. Who else is doing that? Who else is going to say something and maybe people will agree or maybe they'll disagree, but just bringing those fan conversations to public forums, I think is a really important piece of driving interest and continuing a dialogue. So that's what we think about. We want to show up in good channels and we want to provide a service of news or, be a part of the fan dialogue.
So, Haley, if you were advising Jason, myself, or any of our listeners, and you're trying to grow your following, what are some of the things they should be doing and some of the things they should try to stay away from?
It's a tough question. And it's a tough question because it's shifting a lot right now. Like earlier this
Hmm.
year, social media platforms are really prioritizing creator content. So it does vary with the platforms, but I think generally consistency, speed, and just like hitting the moments that people are talking about. Something big happens, finding a way to be a part of that conversation in one way or another. I think those are the things that really move the needle.
And so what's the next big step forward? We have a good sense of your strategy, but like what are the things you're looking toward? What are these tent poles sort of being created? I mean, it's an interesting moment to talk to you because you are both leveraging the moment but also creating the moment, I would argue, in terms
I
of,
appreciate that.
you
Yeah.
know, it feels like you now have an audience that if you say something's important. So if you're really leaning into the WNBA All-Star game, people are like, "Oh yeah, I got to get on that. I got to see, Navisa Collier being a captain. I need to see Paige Beckers being the only rookie." How do you sort of leverage this moment in the near and midterm?
It's a really good question. I think that we as an industry need to feel incredible urgency right now because we have seen moments where women's sports does break through. And I always use the example of the 99 World Cup.
Yeah.
90,000 people at the Rose Bowl. It was such a big cultural moment. And then what happened? So we have seen these moments where the world pays attention to women's sports. How are we going to make this time different? And for me, it's we have to build the ecosystem. We have to build the industry. And I'm a bit of a broken record, but I really do believe that starts with media. It is great that these games are being televised, that we can actually watch the women's sports product, watch the games. We need to build that fan experience online and in these digital spaces. It is absolutely critical that we Just Women's Sports continue to grow. It's critical that, if it's not us, someone steps in and is building this community of women's sports fans because they're out there. The games are accessible. Who is bridging that? Who is nurturing, engaging this audience? I think that's really critical. So I think as an industry, we have to be really like obsessed with building fans and taking advantage of this opportunity. And then I think off of that, I think it all starts with media, but we have to build this whole industry. You look at commerce on the men's side, we need to go build
Yeah.
that in women's sports, betting, fantasy, there's just so many opportunities that have sort of the same problem. They're really well set up for legacy properties. So I think we have to recognize that we are in a moment of opportunity and be doing everything we can to stand up this industry. So women's sports is here to stay and here to be big, big business.
So let's do a quick lightning round, 5 questions. First thing that pops to your mind, we'll bounce it back and forth. I'll start and then Alex will pick up. You ready?
Oh my gosh. Okay.
All right. What's the best piece of advice you've received on deal making or business?
You have to know your like nose. You have to absolutely know what's like gotta walk away from this.
Know your nose. I like that.
Who is your dream deal making partner?
My dream deal making partner. It's really fun when I get to work directly with athletes and we get to create cool content together. So we're excited to do more of that.
So your dream deal making partner is the next big athlete. I like
Yeah,
that.
there we go.
Which team do you want to see win a championship more than any?
I mean, I'm rooting for Angel City. I'm an LA soccer
Love it.
girl.
ACFC, gotta love it.
What is your hype song before a big meeting or a big negotiation?
I don't have one. I need one. I always relied on my teammates to play the songs in the locker room. So now I'm like weak.
I'm not going to let you get away with that. Give me whatever comes up to your mind. Go.
I am like truly all over the place. I love oldies. I love a good oldie. Makes you feel good, makes you feel centered.
Here's the problem. You're gonna say oldie, and I'm gonna be like, yeah, that was
No,
when
that's
I
what's
was
starting to happen to
that's
me
when
now.
I was
Paula
30.
Abdul.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. All right, last question. What's your advice for someone listening who wants a career like yours?
I think you just got to go for it. Go for it and burn the ships.
I love it. All right, Haley Rosen, you're a champ. I love reading your stuff. Thank you so much for joining us. You are, we say it all the time on here. We love to talk to people at the White Hot Center of what's going on, and no one is there more than you. So thank you so much for spending some time with us.
Thank you so much for having me. This was so fun.
Thank you, Haley.